Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Avid Outdoors podcast. We're sitting here with Russell Gahagan of The Real Shot Sheboygan and my co-host Tyler Chisholm of Wolfpack Adventures. This one's going to be a fun one. We're talking about salmon fishing primarily, bait shop industry, and sports shows and things like that, so stick around.
Hi, I'm Tyler.
And I'm Dave.
We're charter captains from Sheboygan, Wisconsin.
We're also avid outdoorsmen. We love hiking, hunting, fishing, camping, and just being outside.
We want to connect you with the experts in the outdoors and hear your story.
We're stewards of this planet, and we want to make sure the hobbies we enjoy today are available for generations to come. This is Avid Outdoors.
Russell Gahagan from The Real Shot Sheboygan. You run the store over there and have been fishing the lake for years and years and years. Kind of just introduce yourself a little bit, Russell.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate the opportunity. I think trying to get more information out in the public about salmon fishing especially is important because it's probably one of the types of fishing that isn't talked about as much as walleyes and bass and all that. So it's always good to get opportunities to talk about it, get guys excited for the upcoming season. I do own The Real Shot in Sheboygan. We have another store in Appleton. I've been in the tackle business pretty much my whole life since I was a charter first mate back in the day with Dumper Dan as a high school kid. Once I got out of high school, I started selling tackle for a company called Pro Troll who makes flashers. Traveled all over the U.S. and Canada selling products there. And then in 2010, my relatives and I opened up Anglers Avenue, which was the tackle store that we opened in Sheboygan, and then just a little over a year ago I merged with The Real Shot in Appleton, so now we have the two stores.
And you have some pretty cool stuff coming up in actually really close to when this is going to come out, and all spring long. So talk about that a little bit. It's really one of the only ones that's going on. So
one of the things we do every year at our store is we have a spring sale, but around that sale I always have seminars, and then this particular year I'm going to be giving a salmon school. So the dates for that is March 7th and 8th, which is coming up fast like you said. On the 7th we'll have 3 walleye seminars which are free. They're 10 a.m., noon, and 2. All you got to do is just show up at our store in Sheboygan at 510 South Pier Drive, and you'll be able to come right in and watch one of these free seminars from some top pros like Tommy Kimos, Max Wilson, some of the best fishermen on the walleye circuit. And then on Sunday the 8th, I'm giving a salmon school, which you have to sign up for and pay. It's $75, but with that you get obviously the school itself, which you're going to learn a ton of knowledge that I've gained over the years. It goes from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. We take a break in there for lunch, which I provide, and then I also provide coffee and donuts in the morning. So it's really a good deal.
That sounds like a hell of a deal.
I'd come just
sign me up.
Yeah, it's good. It'll be a fun time. It's interactive. Obviously I talk a lot, but the other thing I'm really big on with seminars is I love questions.
Yeah.
And I love conversation back and forth, and I ask for that. If somebody has a thought or an opinion or they have a style of something that they do that works for them, I tell people don't be afraid to tell me that or tell everybody that, because there is no one way in fishing to do things. As you mentioned before, my background, my dad's been a charter captain in Lake Michigan. This will be either his 39th or 40th season. So I grew up, a block from the lake. Grew up around the industry. I worked for Dumper Dan when I was a kid. I fished tournaments all over the Lake Michigan and Lake Ontario. Salmon fishing, had quite a bit of success there. But I also walleye tournament fished for years with my dad. So we traveled all over the Midwest doing that. One of the things that the walleye fishing thing really taught me that helped me in salmon fishing is there's no one way to do things. When you start competing against 249 other two-man teams in one tournament, you realize really quickly that very few people are doing similar things. Like, there might be 150 guys trolling, but out of them 150 guys trolling, most of them are trolling different baits, most of them are trolling different colors, or using different types of line, different boards, weights, all different things. So there's no one way to do things, and that's why it's great to interact with people and talk and just see what works for everybody.
I might add, don't try to tell anybody on Facebook that there's more than one way to do something, though. You try to, throw in a new idea in places, they're like, oh, what's wrong with this idea? It's like, I know what I'm talking about, bud. So I just think that's a little bit funny. But yeah, I mean, there's nobody more legit than you when it comes to especially fishing Lake Michigan, trout, salmon, and walleyes. So it's truly a unique experience if you have the opportunity to go and see Russell give a seminar. Well worth your time and money. There's nothing like being in the room with an expert. So,
and there's other for those that might not be from the Sheboygan or even southeastern Wisconsin area. There's other dates and other locations that you're going to be doing the same school. So where might they be able to find that information, or where are those locations going to be at?
Yeah, so they can always check our Facebook page, either the Real Shot Sheboygan page, or I have one called Russell Salmon Tech, which is where I'm kind of piloting all this stuff on. The dates for the other ones are April 4th will be in Manistee, Michigan. April 11th will be in Appleton, Wisconsin. And then March 14th, I believe it is, will be in Holland, Michigan.
Okay.
So we got opportunities there all around both sides of the lake for guys to get in on this deal.
And we'll put all of that information. We'll link Russell's Facebook pages, Instagram pages to all of our stuff
website
when this comes out. That way, it's right at your fingertips to find all this stuff for those who may not be from the area.
We'll make it easy on you. We want you to be able to find Russell, find his salmon school, find his bait shop. Because he's a wealth of knowledge. Even just like stopping in at the bait shop, you can ask any question. You're there almost every single time that I go in there. It's amazing that you can be in all these different places because you're always there.
Yeah.
Well, I am there a lot. I mean, that's part of the deal with this kind of business. I feel like if you're going to have a tackle store in today's environment, right, and you're going to have an old school bait store, as you call it, which is what we want to be. We don't want to be Gander Mountain. We don't want to be Shields.
Yep.
If you're going to do that, the guy that pays the bills, as I say, has to be there.
Yeah.
Obviously, I am the background of the store, so to be able to offer that, people drive from a long distance, sometimes without calling or asking, and they hope and expect to see me. So I'm there as much as I can be, much as reasonable. And you're right. I mean, it's a place to talk. We laugh. I've got a group of old guys that come in every morning that fish the pier. When they're done fishing the pier, they come in and drink coffee, and we just like to talk about fishing. That's why they come in. They have a cup of coffee or two, and we just talk about fishing. Did you catch anything today? What does the lake look like? What does the conditions look like? How do we think tomorrow is going to be or next week? And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't want to give away all of your secrets that you're going to be giving away for the next few months, but it is early spring, kind of end of winter. This particular winter, you could have been in a boat all winter long fishing for trout and even maybe some salmon down in the southern basin. We're going to discuss some early season, winter and spring tactics on Lake Michigan. And to start that off, where would you be fishing right now, early March?
Well, what you said before is right. It's a weird winter. They've been fishing basically all winter. And I think what's important about that is fishing is red hot right now. Right now, today, fishing's on fire. And truthfully, anywhere south, it's really good. I've been in communications with guys down in Michigan City, down in Portage, Indiana. The southern tip, bottom of the lake there is incredible. I've seen and talked to guys that have had 40, 50, 60 fish days already. Cohos, occasional lake trout mixed in, occasional brown trout mixed in there. But I mean, just, really ridiculously good fishing. So for me, number one, my first thoughts are, I think it's going to be a really good season. Anytime we tend to get a soft winter, and then if we get a good early spring, warm spring, that we don't know yet, and I'm crossing my fingers on, but the soft winter sets up for a better spring. I think it's going to be a really, really good year on Lake Michigan in general. And then what I saw this weekend that really got me excited was the guys that went out of Bender Park for the first time in quite a while, cracked a pretty good trolling. Yeah. And, they've been getting them casting kind of all winter, but that's a spot-on-a-spot thing, which tells me that those fish aren't spread out and really set up yet. This weekend, almost everybody that went down there limited out. So when that happens, that tells me that the fish are starting to set up in more of a spring-type situation. And considering we're, petering on 1st of March here, that's a really good sign for what we have to come. And, places like Sheboygan, Port Washington, Manitowoc are going to be likely open and ready to fish here in the next couple of weeks. And that's going to be really exciting for guys that have waited all winter to get their boats wet.
So when they're fishing, so in particular you talk about Bender Park. Now Bender Park is also considered Oak Creek power plant. There's a huge warm water discharge down there. I've fished it. I've guided some stuff down there. But up in Sheboygan, things have changed by our power plant. We don't get the warm water discharge like they do down there. So how do you target those fish this time of year when the water is like, I mean, it's got to be in the low 30s right now.
Really, it's the same way, but the interesting part is a lot of people don't really look at it hard enough to understand this. So the unique part about our power plant and the Pigeon River, which people got to understand is almost like a power plant in ways, because when that river dumps out in the lake, it's substantially warmer than the lake water. What the temperature actually is, I don't think is so important. Any variance is what's important. So if you get a little section of water that's warmer than the rest, that's really what you're looking for. The handful of times I've been down to Oak Creek, I've caught almost nothing right outside of the discharge. But most of my good fishing has been maybe like a mile or two south or a mile or two north based on the wind. That warm water that's been pumping out of there will get pushed one direction, and it'll kind of set up, couple of miles for a couple of miles north or a couple of miles south. And generally, I think those fish don't necessarily want to be right in that discharge warm water. They want to be kind of where it all mixes together and settles in.
Yeah,
yep, where it settles together. So
where the bait fish are hanging out a lot of times too.
Yep.
Right
So
on that transition.
in Sheboygan, what I look for is I try to look for, I call it kind of snapped off water is what I call it, where this river will dump out for the pigeon or where the power plant will pump out, and that warm water that's coming from either one of those two sources or the harbor mouths for that matter, the river water coming out of the harbor in Sheboygan kind of breaks away. And sometimes you'll see, because you can just see it's a little bit discolored, it's a little bit warmer, maybe green, might be brown, might be gray, but you can see it's different than all the other crystal clear blue cold water. That's the section you generally want to work, and that's generally where you're going to find groups of fish early in the spring like this.
Okay. And so now, like, what species of fish are you generally targeting this time of year? Because I know from experience we don't get a lot of salmon up this far quite yet.
Right. So for us here in Sheboygan, it's going to be primarily browns, and then usually towards the end of the spring fishing, late April, mid-April time frame, the lake trout will actually move in when the bait fish moves in. The alewives will come in to spawn, and when they start to move in, the lake trout will actually follow them in from the lake, and then we'll all of a sudden, you can always tell it's getting to be the end of the spring fishing when your lake trout numbers start to outweigh your brown trout numbers. You then realize that you're down to the last few days or weeks, because once the bait fish, the alewives flood the shoreline, the fish don't go anywhere, but you just can't compete with the natural bait anymore. So, but now, like you said, that's here. You get down as far as Milwaukee and south, you may see a little bit closer to a 50-50 mix in Milwaukee on any given day. You may get half cohos or a couple of kings thrown in. And then once you get south of about Kenosha, I would say those numbers go heavy coho, a lot less lake trout or brown trout the further south you go.
And are they feeding, like, when the alewives aren't in, they're feeding mainly on gobies, and which is different because a lot of people don't, like, when the gobies first came, everybody was scared nothing's going to eat the gobies, right? And now, like, that seems to be a huge staple for multiple species, and that has affected our bite in a more positive manner.
Yeah, it's unique. There's also another food source right now that I think is really important that a lot of people aren't aware of yet, and it's this, I believe it's something called freshwater shrimp. It's a shrimp species of some sort. It's pinkish in color. We've been talking a lot about it with the DNR as far as these stocking numbers and feed and all these different things. And this shrimp has just exploded in volume from what they can tell from what, we really didn't even have it as a food source on the radar 15 years ago, and now it's, I think for a lot of these shoreline fish especially, it's a really huge food source. And the way I kind of could tell is if you look at these cohos and these browns, you open them up and they're just like this beautiful orange color that's coming from the shrimp. They're not getting that color from gobies. They're not getting that color from alewives. That's more of a whitish type meat. That's where the ones that you open up and they have more of that kind of natural whitish colored meat, that's where, what they're feeding on. But these ones that are really heavy on the shrimp, they have this beautiful orange flesh, and it's really kind of cool. So it makes it a different deal because, some of the bait colors and things we use change by that, as you said before. before, if they're feeding on gobies, we use a little bit more brown, a little more black and gold, stuff like that. Obviously, if we know they're on these shrimps, orange and gold, different things like that. And then when the alewives move in, we start to actually change over to a lot more silvers and blues and more natural colors, black and silver stuff that's going to mimic the bait that's around at that time.
Do you think these shrimp are small enough that the bait fish are even eating on them? Because I know, like, from my perspective, bait fish population has just exploded. I know it's got a lot to do with, lower king salmon numbers, and then also like higher river waters. There's places that these fish are able to get into and spawn, the bait fish particularly, I'm saying. But do you think the bait fish are eating these shrimp as well, or is it just the salmon that are eating them? Or
no, I think the bait fish are eating them as well, and it looks like it's a great food source for them, and it's really important to our Lake Michigan Fishery in general because our plankton numbers are way down.
Sure.
We don't have the color in the water that we had 15, 20 years ago. Very rare now to even see green water in general on Lake Michigan away from harbor mouse or river mouse. So,
and that's healthy water. That greenish water, that's something you should want to see, honestly. This clear blue like stuff that people are coming to the resorts to see is not healthy. That's not a healthy system. So
not healthy for the fish anyway.
Right.
So one of the stories that I tell a lot when talking about this exact subject that's fun is I went and fished a tournament on Lake Ontario 2 years ago now, and it was out of Wilson Harbor, which is right by the Niagara River, and that's the river that pumps in from Lake Erie. And obviously everybody knows Lake Erie's booming right now with walleyes, and Lake Erie's full of color, full of bait fish, full of plankton, and full of walleyes. So this Niagara River dumps into Lake Ontario, and we fished the tournament, pre-fished a lot, and fished the actual tournament right there out in front of the Niagara. And it was really cool because it brought me back to my childhood mating days where, there was 20 miles of green water, and 100 feet of water. And here we are fishing 90, 100 feet, and it's that green water, that magic color that we used to look for that we've just seen less and less and less of. And, that area at the Niagara there, it just is, exploding with bait fish and everything in the springtime because it's pumping out warmer water, bait, and of course the fish find it. So you're exactly right. We're looking for that water. There is still a little bit of that left here and there. It does happen, right wind conditions, right rivers start pumping out, different things happen, and we can see it, but it's surely not often.
Yeah.
And to kind of take a turn away from like the winter spring fishing thing, I guess we were talking about a little bit about the state of the fishery. And we were discussing this before we were even recording of what things are looking like. And I mean, in our opinion as charter captains, Dave and I both think that the lake is doing phenomenal. We're enjoying our days on the water still. It's not like it used to be because back in the early 2000s when the fishing was so outstandingly good, it wasn't healthy for the fishery. And then we saw the repercussions of that. And now, in your opinion, as a bait shop owner and a guy who has seen the lake ups and downs for many, many years, what is your opinion on the lake?
Well, I think the number one thing I tell people all the time is give it 5 minutes and it'll change. and that's really the truth. Yeah. It really is. But I'm 37 years old now, and like I said, I grew up a block from the lake, so I've seen it. I've seen a lot of it, and I'm blessed to have a dad that's in his low 60s now, and he's been doing it for 40 years, so he's seen about all of it. And it goes like this, right? So in the 80s, it was booming, lots of fish, good sized fish, big fish in the 80s, 20 pounders, 25 pounders, and tons of them. And then the 90s came along, and we had this scare. This BKD scare, and I can remember a time mating for dumper in my early days of mating where we lived and died on steelhead. Very 1-2 kings a trip. It was reminiscent of a couple of years ago. Very brutal. There were talks could be over, no more king salmon, yada yada. They all got the disease. They're gonna die. We can't keep them in the lake anymore. They're not gonna survive. And wouldn't you know it, the early 2000s came, and literally the best fishing for a stretch of 5 years that the lake has ever seen came in about 2001 to 2006, where you literally couldn't do anything wrong. I remember doing a article with North American Fisherman magazine, and the guy says, well, what time should we come? Like 4 a.m.? And I said, you can't take any pictures at 4 a.m., right? And he's like, no. I'm like, what time works best? And he's like, well, high noon's really the best for pictures. I said, well, I'll meet you at the dock at 11. And by 2:30, we caught 15 kings.
Yeah.
I mean, it was that good. You guys were there. You know that. It was that good. And then now we're in, 2020 here, and where we're at is we had a couple of really tough years from about 2013 to 2018, I would say, and we're kind of coming out of that now. The fish are the biggest I've ever seen in my lifetime. On average, there was more 25-plus pounders caught in the Port of Sheboygan in 2019. I can honestly say that I will remember all the way back to the late 80s. My dad would agree with that.
On a scale, 25-pounders,
right.
too.
Like, on a scale, 25-pounders, and I'm talking about...
a legit scale, not you know who. Like
I'm talking about a ratio of amount of people out there fishing for them. And how many they're catching and all that, obviously. But the nice part is, the fish numbers are down, as you said. What we're putting in the lake is down, but the size is way, way up. And the DNR has made a decision, Wisconsin has made a decision to stand on its own 2 feet and say, we're going to put a few more fish in the lake because we think the lake can handle it. And I was one of the ones that publicly stated that I thought the lake could handle it as well. I mean, I think it appears to be obvious that the fish didn't get that big by starving to death.
Right.
So they can handle some more fish in the lake, the bait can, and they're going to do it in small manners, and I think that that's a good positive way to approach it. Don't go crazy and dump a whole bunch in, because we really don't want to revert back to 2005 or 6 where we got in this danger zone of an adult king was 14 pounds. We don't want to go there. Ideally 17 to 20 pound kings I think are a really good healthy fish for an adult size. With a random 25, but these 30, 34, 36 pound fish, I mean, while they're fun for the guy that catches them, truthfully, that's not healthy.
They are really tough on equipment.
Really
tough on equipment.
They are. And they're really tough on equipment after you just caught 2 20-pounders.
Yeah.
Because it's like you get a hot rod, right? And you catch a 20, and then you catch a 24, and they just tore your gear up a little bit, and then you catch a 30. After that, it's like, you hope to keep them on because your gear's just getting shredded from these fish because they're 20, 30, 40-minute battles. On your rods, your reels, your flashers, your flies.
Your fishermen.
Fishermen, yeah. No, you guys are taking customers out that are new to it, or maybe haven't done it a lot. They haven't battled anything this big. You guys haven't battled anything this big in a couple of years. So, it's kind of new for everybody. And these fish, when they decide they want to go, they're going to go.
Yep.
So now that reflects into our winter and spring fishing. As the fish are bigger, we're getting, normally... Well, as I was growing up as a kid, and even in the recent years, you go out in the early part of the spring and go brown trout fishing, and your cookie cutter fish, those 3 to 7, maybe an 8-pounder in there, and you're like, okay, those are all nice eating size fish. And now it's like, you go down. I was in Oak Creek in January, and we had 2 fish over 15 pounds, and they were both really nice sea forellins, and you're like, man, it's really nice to get those kicker fish, and we were actually jigging those fish. So we can talk about jigging a little bit. I had the opportunity to also go down to Indiana this year and jig up lake trout on those offshore reefs. And so I guess why is that southern basin so much better than this northern part for doing those jigging opportunities in that winter time frame?
Well, 2 things. Number one, the southern basin is really the southern third of Lake Michigan is about the only part left that has this colored water that we're talking about, right? So it has this nutrients, kind of this rich water. So it's why the fish generally go down there, the ones that do migrate north and south, go down there in the winter time, is because it's the first, as spring comes, it's kind of the first section that warms up because it's the shallowest part of the lake. So it warms up first, kind of gets some color, the bait fish get going, and these fish get going. The other thing is down there, as you said, there's some offshore reefs that you can reach. The thing about it is here, from Port Washington north, there's no really offshore reefs that we can reach. There's one in between Port and Sheboygan that's 20 miles out, but we can't fish it.
Yep.
It's not legal to fish inside of there. So, we don't have that opportunity. That particular reef you might be talking about out of Waukegan for lake trout is absolutely phenomenal. I've fished that a bunch of times in October for lake trout, and I've done a couple YouTube videos fishing it. And I mean, it's sick. I mean, 20 to 40 fish days, and you can literally average 15 plus pounds per lake trout with every third one being 20 plus, So what you said before that I think is important to comment about is it isn't only king salmon that are big, right? Yeah. We're seeing the cohos to be big on average. We're seeing brown trout that are bigger. We're seeing lake trout. And then even this year, I was really impressed with the size of the steelhead. It seemed like you went offshore and you got your occasional what we call pellet bow, as we call them, this small 3-4 pound rainbow, right? But that was not the regular. Where normally you'd go out there and catch 10, you'd have 4, 5, 6 of these pellet bows, and then 3, 4 nice ones. Seemed like last year it was like 2, 3 of these pellet bows and 5, 6, 7 of these nice 4 to 12 pound rainbows, right? Yep. So I know you did some videos and had some dandy steelhead. Yeah. So the thing is this great opportunity of food source for the fish right now isn't just for king salmon. They're all eating a ton of bait, and they're all growing very fast and compared to what we're used to seeing.
And we're seeing it on our electronics too. I mean, as we are trolling around out there, we're constantly watching on the graph, and we're just seeing piles and piles and piles of bait, which I have never seen before. I don't know exactly. It seems like the DNR will come up with this report, and I'm like, well, this doesn't make any sense compared with what I'm seeing, what I'm actually seeing with my eyes. Is Sheboygan that much different than everywhere else? Are they what's the reasoning behind that?
And you look at that next, that next bite video just came out that you filmed last year, and you look at the graph in that video, and it's just arc after arc after arc sitting over the top of bait. And you even explained it in there. You can't catch fish when there's that much bait.
Yeah, it makes really tough fishing.
It's like literally fishing at a Chinese buffet. It doesn't work,
No, that episode is actually a prime example of why I think our fishery is in such good shape. We went out that morning, set up, and obviously the idea for the show was to try to catch big kings. You want to highlight anything you catch in Lake Michigan because they're going to be big in comparison to what those guys are fishing on average walleyes. Yep. Our fish are going to be bigger, so they're going to be fun and exciting either way. But we wanted to catch big kings, so we set up an 80, 90 foot of water, which is where I would generally like to fish kings if I can. And in July, that's a good general depth to start in. And the graph was just flooded with bait. And I think we picked away one lake trout early. And, I mean, we're talking first light when you should get them. I mean, we went out in the dark and set up, and we're ready in case it happened, right? The magic time where it should be bang, bang, bang. And we're watching hook and hook and hook and all this bait. And I'm starting to get upset, and I'm like, what's going on? Getting frustrated, and I'm thinking to myself, there's just too much bait here. So as we slid out, we got out in that 140 to 180 area, where you normally wouldn't generally think big king fishing. Yep. 140, 180, we got outside of that bait to where we just marked very small pods of random bait, and all of a sudden, bang fish. And while I think there wasn't nearly the kings out there that there was in 80 to 90, we just had no chance against all that natural bait. I mean, why would they pick out our couple of lures swimming through the water when there was probably, 50, 100, whatever it is, 1,000 alewives swimming around that they can grab instantly and go?
It'd almost be like fishing the gap in May. There's going to be kings around there, but you're going to snag bait fish around the harbor in May. But yeah, it's the same thing. You're not going to be catching kings because they're going to be filling up, packing their bellies full of alewife. So.
Which, that's one of the big factors that I've talked a lot to the DNR about, is I've said, we've got to be really careful because we got there, I felt like, in that 2013 to 2019 timeframe where the bait fish population actually was increasing and the number of fish we were putting in was decreasing at such a rapid level that we got to the point that there's too much bait in the lake for the fish. I know it's going to be really hard for a lot of people to believe, but I'm sticking to that statement. There's actually too much bait right now for the amount of fish that are in the lake, predators. So the issue is, because that's out of whack a little bit, it's making the fishing much more difficult than it should be. Yeah. If that bait fish population was down X percent, or if the fish population was up X percent, which is what I'm hoping happens and what's going to happen with the DNR putting more in, that's going to balance out a little more. Those fish are now going to have to hunt again to get their bait, and when they have to hunt, that opportunity window to catch them widens, because right now they pretty much got to open their mouth, swim forward, and they're done, right? They're done eating. So we need them to be like the deer When it comes time for October to come around and everybody's jacked up for the rut, that's what we need. That's when you see that big buck when he starts rutting and he's willing to walk around in broad daylight looking for the doe. We need that out of these fish. We need them hunting around and looking for bait, not just able to open their mouth and eat when they want.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so that next bite episode, you guys actually filmed it out of a 21-foot fiberglass boat, and which is classic winter spring fishing opportunity. And so those guys are big walleye guys, and so with that being said, if you want to go salmon fishing and trout fishing in the spring, the spring is probably the best time, in my opinion, to go and utilize the equipment you already have to go fishing. And so kind of explain about like tackle and lure selection and rods and all that other stuff.
So spring and fall are definitely the two best times. If you have a 18 to 20 foot walleye boat with walleye gear, you can pretty much use what you have for rods and reels, planer boards, and we can help you make that work by just buying a little bit of tackle. And the reason that is because we're going to be fishing close to shore. So as we talked about before, in spring, we're primarily fishing here in Sheboygan inside a 20 foot of water. In Milwaukee, I would say inside a 30 foot of water. Down in Portage, Indiana, inside a 20, 30 foot of water a lot this time of year. So number one, you don't need a big boat because you're not away from shore. If something happens, weather gets goofy, you're in 5 minutes, so that's not a big deal. That's one of the reasons you don't need a big boat. And the other reason is actually the smaller boats, I think, have more success early and late in the year because in that 5, 10, 15 foot of water, these big 30 footers with twin inboards chugging along and they're turning up water, I think sometimes can spook the fish more than help. So the way we fish this time of year primarily is planer boards are number one. We're going to run your standard kind of offshore planer boards you would use for walleye fishing with some spoons or crankbaits on them. And then, we do like to run slide divers on the charter boats, or even on my small boat, I like to run a pair of slide divers just to get them away from the boat, have them extra dipsy rods. Some days they're the hot rod, but you really don't even need to have that. If a guy just owns 6 planer board rods with 6 planer boards, you can go out there and have a blast in Sheboygan, Manitowoc, Kewaunee, Milwaukee, Kenosha. You can catch a whole bunch of fish, both brown trout, lake trout, and also coho salmon on those same rods.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what makes it fun, and then come fall time, it's sort of the same thing, but it's a little bit more now king salmon oriented. But you can really troll around the harbor mouth areas and some of that shallow water stuff with 4 to 6 boards or a couple of dipsies and 4 boards and catch a good number of king salmon, enough to definitely keep you excited about fishing. That's for sure. So one of the things we do this time of year, fishing in that shallow water, we look for warm water like we talked about before, but then the other thing we do is we troll pretty slow. Just like walleye fishing or any other type of fishing, when the water's really cold, you really don't want to troll fast. I mean, the fish aren't very aggressive early in the year. They're still kind of lethargic because the water is so cold. When they do feed, those windows seem to be small, and they seem to not be super excited to do so. So speeds of like even 1.7, 1.8, up to about 2.22 is about the max we tend to do when we're chasing spring fish on Lake Michigan in general. And then, of course, as the summer comes along and the water warms up, well, then that opportunity and speed goes up and up and up. As far as baits and colors, I would say one of the things that really has changed since I've been a kid is when we fished browns when I was a kid, it was all stick baits. It was all crankbaits, Rapalas when I was a real young kid. Then it turned into like shallow diving thunder sticks and Dave's kabooms, and now it's kind of flicker shads and this bay rat, which is like basically like a thunder stick. Still use thunder sticks. Those type of baits, these shallow diving baits that only get down a couple of feet, really seem to work well. But I think since the gobies have come in to play, spoons have really worked better than they did 5, 10, and even 20 years ago. For whatever particular reason now, Michigan Stinger spoons especially, I think they just kind of, their standard size, their Stinger, just kind of seems to be the perfect size. And along with that, with this whole goby thing, we're finding that, gold and copper blanked spoons tend to work better. The gold or copper back definitely mimics that brownish color of a goby better. We've really seen an increased catch rate over the past 3-4 years when we've sort of switched almost 100% at least right away in the early spring, to gold and copper colored spoons. And there was a time where it was all stick baits for me, and there was a good time where it was like a mix 50-50, and then now I would say I'm probably 80-20 spoons over stick baits. I'll still throw a couple sticks out, and every once in a while, an odd day, sticks are hot and I'll end up with 4 or 5 of them out. But I would say on an average day, if I got 6-8 rods out, probably 80% of them got spoons on them.
And I think, I fish a lot of sticks still, but like you said, you go slow. And I think like when you're talking about the Michigan Stinger spoons, I think that profile allows you to go a little bit slower. Where like your larger, wider profile spoons, it takes a lot more to get that wobble. And speed's a huge thing in the spring. Like if you're going too fast, you're probably not going to get them. If you're going too slow, you're not getting the right action, and you're probably going to snag bottom a lot. Now, are you using lead core at all, or are you just doing a lot more inline weights?
You can use both. I use inline weights just because, again, I actually use my walleye tackle for spring. My dad and I just have some rods set up with 20-pound braid that we use with a fluoro leader for walleye fishing, for trolling on Winnebago and Green Bay. But then out on Lake Michigan, then we'll just hook on I actually found a couple of years ago, and then I started selling them at the store, I found a guy who made 1/8 ounce inline weights, and that's key. I mean, if you can find like 1/8 ounce or 1/4 ounce, really, really small inline weights, because again, we talked a lot, we're fishing in, like, for me preferably, like 10 foot or less water. So when you're fishing in that skinny, two things happen. A, you can't let the weight out a long ways, right. And B, because you're in that shallow, there is a big spook factor. So you do want to get your boards way away from the boat, but you also want to try to get your line as far away from the board as possible. So using the lightest weight you can with a spoon is ideal, so you can still try and get it back 20-30 feet away from that board, because I think on a flat calm day, even that board can be a little bit of a spook factor. If you got that board up in 4 foot of water, and it starts throwing a little bit of a wake, I mean, even that can be a spook factor. So I like the inline weights, but a guy can use like 1-color lead cores are really popular, even up to 2 colors if you're out in that 12-15 foot. The thing there is, unless you're probably a charter and have 3-4 of those setups already, probably not a setup you would buy 3-4 of just to use. So you can make your stuff work with just some small weights.
Cool. Well, yeah, this time of year is definitely one of the best while you're waiting for those walleye waters to open up yet. Lake Michigan is already open, and good time to get out. Some of the best fishing action is happening as we speak, I think.
It's unbelievable. I'm always chomping at the bit to get out for brown trout. There was a couple of years in a row that I had spring break, so I actually had to chop ice away from the launch and hike it just to get the boat out. And actually, I couldn't even fish where I wanted to because I had to go out past, because there was just a film of ice out on Hika Bay. It's kind of like protected a little bit there, but it's fun to get out there and feel that cold air, and there's migrating birds and things, and it's a lot of fun to target those fish. It seems like they're just aggressive, like you catch fish while you're setting the boards on the line, so like 15 feet back. So although there are those days that you get that spookiness of them, some days they're just in attack mode.
Some other things I think are important to mention. I have a bunch of videos on YouTube. So if you type in like Anglers Avenue brown trout, you'll probably find a online school that I gave specifically on spring brown trout fishing. Dave does a nice job of doing videos on YouTube too, so you can look up either one of us. But I definitely have some specific teaching stuff about spring brown trout that I think really will help. If you're a big salmon and trout fisherman, the Real Shot will be coming out with our salmon guide again this year, our buyer's guide. We'll probably have that out mid to end of March. That guide is something that we put online, and then we'll also have in both stores paper copy. It's really designed for the guy that wants to spend his money wisely. Some of us have an addiction to fishing tackle, and some of us, and some of us, that would be. Some of us buy it for a reason to use it. And if you're buying it only for the reason to use it, well, then this guide's great, because we're literally going to lay out, this is what's new, this is what really worked last year. You should have, if you're a serious salmon and trout fisherman, you should have everything in that guide for the most part. And if you're an addicted guy like me, then you have a whole tackle store in your basement. But that guide is important. Guys can always find us online at therealshot.com. But one of the things I always try to encourage, and I really want to encourage, is guys can come and see me at the store, or they can feel free to call anytime. The direct number of the store is 920-395-2079. I actually enjoy getting guys set up to fish out there. I enjoy guys that have been fishing out there a long time, but they're struggling. Coming in, I've had numerous guys in the past month, even though I've been gone more than I've been around with the show circuit. I've had numerous guys in the past month, and almost every week all summer long, I'll have a couple of guys come in and they'll literally drive their boat and truck to the store. We'll look at all their gear. We'll go over it all. I'll help them sort of, see if they need different rods or different line on rods or different setups. We'll rig it all together. I'll look through their tackle. I'll basically tell them, take this home and put it in your basement or sell it. This is good stuff. Use this. Get them on the right stuff, because we all know that, where you're fishing is important, how you're fishing is important, and then what you're fishing with is important. So sort of direct them into use this type of stuff. And then, obviously give them pointers like we're going to talk about in the salmon school coming up and things like that. But guys can feel free to come into the store anytime. Always try and call, make sure I'm going to be there ahead of time, set something up. But I encourage that, especially if you're really excited about the fishery and you want to learn more about, how to catch fish on the lake. We can get the guys set up, and I always like to do that because I feel like when guys go to a box store, they end up generally spending about half their money incorrectly, and it's just sort of natural, right? You get to one of these places and a guy starts telling you all these things you need, and most of the time, nothing against them, but most of the time they're not people that are fishing on the lake like you are, or you are, or I am, so they don't have that knowledge base to really understand how a guy may be new to it, or a guy just getting heavy into it, what he can handle, what he should have, what is the hottest stuff now. Some of these guys are retired guys or whatever that are working at these places. They maybe, fished the lake 20 years ago but haven't lately. So try to get ahead of this and get somebody new or somebody really getting into it. Get them to spend their money correctly so you only spend it once instead of a bunch of times. Because I feel so bad when a guy comes to me and he's like, I got all this stuff and I spent $3,000 at Gander and I didn't catch any fish, or any particular box store, not that one in particular, but a box store, and I didn't catch very many fish, and it doesn't seem like I have the stuff that everybody else is talking about at the boat ramps, and I feel like I don't have the right stuff, and then I look and I go, well, you really don't, and now we're going to go 2,000 deeper into the pocketbook to get you reset up. So if we can set you up right the first time, that's really the ideal way to do it.
Yeah, if you are around the area, or even if you're not and you're looking to get out salmon fishing, come to Sheboygan. Not only is Russell's store there and you can stop in and talk to him, but also Sheboygan's probably one of the busiest charter fishing ports on Lake Michigan, so he's always got an up-to-date, great fishing report. He'll give you everything you need to know right there in the store. Plus, stop on down on the boardwalk. Don't be afraid to talk to the captains that are down there, because most of them will give you information on the fishing.
Exactly.
And,
yep.
I mean, it's not... none of us are holding a secret, because the fishing is fishing. Whether you're there or you're not, you still have to catch them. So check it out. I guess with that being said, kind of wrap things up here. Stop in at the store, hook up with one of these seminars that he's got going on. The guy's a wealth of information. And other than that, Dave, where can they catch another podcast from us?
Well, we are on Facebook. We are on YouTube. We've got SoundCloud, so you can download our podcasts on iTunes and also Samsung or the Google Play Store. Sorry, that's kind of just the most common brand. But and drop us a line in any of those places. You can also send us an email at avidoutdoorspodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. Russell would love to hear from you. And that'll about do it from us, huh?
Yeah, maybe this spring we'll get Russell in the boat and do a little video.
That'd be pretty cool. That'd be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for listening, everybody.
This is Avid Outdoors.